Hello, listeners, and welcome to Beyond the Mirror. This isn't just another podcast, it's a deep dive into the world of beauty, wellness, and longevity. Now, we're here to discuss what beauty really means beyond just appearances. We'll also talk about wellness, the habits and practices that keep us healthy, full of energy, and we'll explore the topic of longevity, looking at the science and realities of living a long, fulfilling life. So sit back, relax, and join us as we go beyond the mirror. Welcome back to Beyond the Mirror. Today, we are going to be exploring the very sought after topic of thyroid health. And one of the reasons that I wanted to cover this is in my past, my grandma, my mom, they all had Hashimoto's. So, long history of women in our family having thyroid disorder. And so, of course, in my journey through health and wellness, of course, I wanted to know, how can I not get that? How can I change the trajectory for my health and wellness by helping them get through whatever it is that's causing this? Obviously, there's some sort of reason that they were having it. I didn't know at the time what it was, but I wanted to dive into thyroid health more and learn as much as I could so that I could help me and my children not get it. And so, really, there is a very huge battle going on right now with thyroid disorder, and it affects a whole bunch of Americans, about 90% of Americans, in fact. And many, about 50%, are walking around with a thyroid disorder and don't even know it because they're either subclinical, they maybe have symptoms, and they go and get their labs done, and the labs say, "Nope, you're good, you're normal," which is very common. And so then you're left with, okay, now what? I I went and I sought out attention like I'm supposed to do, and yet you know, I'm not getting any answers. And I do want to start by also saying I am not a physician, and this is for educational purposes. We're going to talk quite a bit about thyroid health and what you can do naturally, and lifestyle changes, what to look for, um, things that you can do that are natural.
Yes, and I think on that subject also, one of the areas that you're seeing a rise in thyroid health issues is pediatric.
Yeah,
And so if there are some non-medicinal forms or ways to help that in young people, that's a tremendous thing as well.
absolutely.
So today I get to be the role of the interviewer
Love it.
because Dina is the wealth of knowledge. And I'm sure I'll have some things to say as I do have thyroid issues myself and have had them for a long time. But I've done a lot of things to improve those numbers. And you really can lessen or possibly remove medication. Maybe not always. Like, I think Dina and I are in that space of there's a place for wellness and herbs and medicine,
Hmm.
and there's a place for medicine.
Correct.
And so sometimes you have to have both. Or
Yeah.
sometimes you can go without. Like there's avenues to play in on all sides.
And I think too, reminding you that you are your best advocate. You know your body best. Jennifer and I talk a lot about, I will say, well, I have this or I have that symptom, and our bodies are so different, and we know our bodies very well. So she'll know, okay, I made this tweak, and here's my results, and she knows what it's from because she knows her body so well. So don't discount the fact that you know your body best. And if you're not getting the answers that you want from any practitioner, they do work for you. So seek out somebody that is willing to go down a road that you want to go down.
Or it's just more in line with the things that you want to try because of your own instincts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
let's start out with, can you enlighten us on how the thyroid plays a role in overall wellness, and why is it referred to as the metabolic powerhouse?
Yeah. The thyroid itself really it governs so much of our energy levels, our temperature, our weight, our mood, our muscle, the joints, our even our appetite and food cravings come from thyroid. And then our sleep, whether we sleep is elusive or it is good, it also governs that. Kind of our overall well-being, and it's also even tied to I've even had people who, like they swallow and it feels like there's something stuck in their throat, or their voice might change, it gets deeper or lighter, and that can also be affected by the thyroid gland as well. And so um, you know, I do like to kind of correlate it. It's not always the thyroid tissue itself. It can sometimes be an underlying inflammatory issue. And that's really what, we kind of want to break that down for you. So it makes it really simple for you to understand.
So
And
you're
to,
kind of you could attack it from more than one direction and
yes,
have a benefit
absolutely. Yeah.
because inflammation is the source of all disease.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So why not
Hmm.
have the thyroid be a part of that as well?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So you were talking about sleep,
Hmm.
and I know honestly there was two things that helped me become diagnosed with thyroid disease. One was sleep issues, and the second was weight issues.
Mm.
So why don't you talk about how the thyroid regulates your ability to feel awake and to rest?
Yeah. So because the thyroid governs our energy and metabolism, and then it's affected by sleep. Of course, we're also going to be affected by stress and, other components, the things that we eat, the medications we take. Those are all going to play a key factor in a role. But I do kind of want to share a little bit of like how the cell works. So when inflammation hits, we have something sort of like stressor in our body. So there's something there that's causing the inflammation. And when the inflammation is present, we have a cell wall, and that cell wall determines what gets in and what gets out of our cell. And a lot of times, the stress and the inflammation that's on that lipid layer that's on the outside of the cell will affect those receptors that allow things in and out. And so, once we have that little dip in energy, we already know inflammation is present because the little mitochondria that make the energy for us can't get what they need. And so then energy starts to dip. We then cannot detoxify the cell's starving for nutrients and things that it needs. And so then you become deficient and toxic at the same time. And then the inflammatory process just keeps going and going and going because you then don't have what you need to detox the cell, and it's a vicious cycle. And so there's a key component to addressing the body and its compensatory patterns that we have. So once the inflammation's there, we need to remove the sources of the inflammation. We also need to address that cell membrane, and those are the first two steps before we do any kind of detoxification. And we have a lot of people that say, "I want to detox," and I'm like, "No, no, no, no. That's step 3." But the omega 6 is what's really important to help balance that cell wall and reduce the inflammation. And I think we're inundated with seed oils,
We are,
and those
definitely.
don't help one bit. And the key is really the good, healthy omega 6s. And that's what helps to address that cellular inflammation.
And so then how does that all relate to thyroid itself and then create the fatigue that is associated quite heavily with thyroid imbalance?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to that mitochondria that gets affected. So once the inflammatory process has set in, we don't have what we need, and your body's in this stress state where it's in this like cycle loop of inflammation, inflammation. It's fighting the good fight. Your energy dips. You already know that the inflammation is present when the energy dips. Your mitochondria then doesn't get what it needs. So it's this vicious cycle where we really need to address that inflammatory component because it ties into the actual tissue itself. So it's not that the tissue in the thyroid actually has the problem. It's the inflammatory process in the cellular level that is causing the thyroid issue. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes. All right. So then when someone is experiencing severe fatigue, there it could be adrenal, which
Could
is
be.
inflammatory
Mhm,
also.
mhm.
It could be thyroid imbalance,
Yeah,
or it could be inflammation causing all of the above or
yeah.
some of the above.
Mhm.
So it all plays a part in, the cycle of health and how your organs are functioning.
Yeah, yeah.
And we can talk about this on another day, but one way that we have helped my thyroid is using a bioregulator,
Correct.
which is a peptide small chain. It's amazing. It's like something you can do. I did it for like 10 or 14 days like 4 months ago, and we actually looked at my labs before and after, and there was a change, and I was able to knock down some of my medication.
Yay!
So that's kind of fun, but
It's awesome.
we can hit on more bioregulators later because there's so many of those and they do so much. But the point of that is there is alternative therapy
Absolutely.
for those types of things as well. Um, a big area of thyroid, like a big red flag for thyroid, is weight for a lot of people.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that was part of my diagnosis. I was fighting weight, I was fighting fatigue. So, how does weight management play into thyroid health?
Yeah, the weight struggle is super real. And, we can diet and exercise till the cows come home. And that's what we're told to do. That's what our programming or the people that know things say, just diet and exercise, but that doesn't always work for someone with a thyroid issue. And it's kind of like throwing gasoline on a fire when you already have that inflammatory process going. You're over here trying to put buckets of water on it, and yet someone's throwing gasoline. And so you're like, "Okay, my efforts are just not even showing up." And it's so frustrating.
Yes, because when your thyroid is off, it is just nearly impossible to to get down.
It really
It's the
is.
same as insulin. I mean, if your insulin is way off,
Mhm.
it's nearly impossible to get down. So if those two, your pancreas that produces insulin or your thyroid, which produces thyroid hormone, are off, now you're having a horrible battle that you don't have to have.
Yes, and then there's also the component too where once the inflammation is present, you're over here trying to work your butt off at the gym, you're eating hardly anything at all, and you're gaining weight.
So I had that exact experience.
Yeah, and it is
So before thyroid and insulin were controlled for me, I was eating 1,200 calories a day. I was working out intensely 5 days a week and gaining weight. And no, not muscle like that. Everyone, oh,
yeah,
you were
yeah.
gaining muscle. No, no, I was overweight. I was definitely overweight and I was making no progress. And these two organs were out of balance. And that was the cause.
Yeah. Yeah, and so there's a threshold at which your body's in a war with the inflammation. You don't have the energy or ability to even keep up, and then you're going to go out there and you're going to exercise like, you're trying to win Miss America, and your body's like, "I don't think so. Mm-mm. No way, not happening," and you put yourself in a more stressed state, and your cortisol goes up, and then you gain weight,
Yeah,
and it's not
it's a
fun.
real thing. I've
It
done
is.
that. I've
It
been
is.
there. It's no fun.
So I'd like to challenge you to the way to lose weight is really to tackle the inflammation here. That's really what in all of my research and all of my studies, that has to happen in
Yeah.
order to address the underlying issue. So it's the key of getting to the root cause is really tackling that inflammation.
And so when you're saying to the average person, you've got to fix your inflammation, that sounds completely overwhelming.
It does. It does.
So are there small things that people could do on their own to start
Absolutely.
that to start that reduction.
Absolutely. I am huge into dietary variation. And some of the things that I like to include are a very clean keto. And you can cycle on and off of keto, and we actually have a podcast about that. If you do want to go back and listen to that, you can listen to that. And keto is one of the best ways to tackle inflammation, hands down, because it helps to repair that cellular membrane that allows things in and out of the cell. And then, of course, removing things that are inflammatory or toxic to you. And for each one of us, that's different. So, like for me, wheat is something that is super toxic to me. Um, our wheat is not the same wheat that I grew up with. We now have glyphosate all over it that destroys your gut, that causes more inflammation in the body. It's a cycle, and we have a lot of crummy foods here
Yes.
that
Yes.
cause inflammation to the body. They're, genetically modified. They don't act right. I call them frankenfoods. I truly believe that removing a lot of those are key to reducing a lot of the inflammation in the body.
Sugar.
Sugar is more addictive than cocaine.
And it's everywhere.
It is.
It's in everything that's processed
Mhm.
because that's how they make it taste good.
It is.
Because they don't use fat like they used to give
No.
it flavor. They use sugar
No.
now.
No.
And so that goes back to eating a whole food diet,
Yep.
rich in vegetables and meat, reduced, inflammatory foods, like you're saying, like wheat. So, like, I don't do as poorly as wheat, but I do horrendously with sugar.
Mm.
So,
Mhm.
you just kind of
We're all
have to
different.
learn your body and
Yeah.
or like I can do a potato, which can be not as good for you, but not bread as much.
Correct. Yeah, and the potato is you're going for not processed.
Correct.
And then bread is processed. And so that's probably one of the keys for you,
Right.
potentially.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Keeping it as whole food as possible.
Correct. Yeah, I do fine with potato too. I love potatoes.
So, lately, also a hot topic in the world is mental health.
Yes. Yes.
And I know there's an interaction from mental health and thyroid health.
Yes.
Can you kind of explain that link?
About 95% of our neurotransmitters come from the gut. Um, when we're eating, things that are inflammatory to us, that, like I mentioned, it destroys the gut flora and the whole ecosystem that you have in the intestinal wall. And I like to say, like, there is a whole ecosystem from this hole to the hole in the back. Like, there is an entire plethora of microorganisms that work for you. If that gets just a little bit off balance, it can change your mood, your focus, your mental clarity, your judgment. And then that also comes with lack of sleep too. If you're, not sleeping well because your thyroid's not working well, or you're just tired and lethargic all day and you can't make decisions, it does affect your mood.
Well, and when you're talking about microbiome from the top to the bottom, like I've recently been looking at oral microbiome,
So important.
and it's crazy, like how mouthwash, for example, is a very negative impact on
Yes.
your oral microbiome, and that is the beginning of that whole start to finish.
And that actually raises your insulin levels.
Yes, it's terrible.
Hmm.
I've actually never been, but here's another one.
Hmm.
I was just reading that it can affect men's ability to get hard.
Yep. Yeah.
So it actually, like, mouthwash can reduce that ability in men's health even.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so it's funny because you think about something like you want your breath to smell good, so
Right.
you are appealing to your partner, but in using the mouthwash, you might actually be reducing how that all turns out.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Uh-huh.
Wow. All
So
connected.
it's all connected.
Yeah.
So thyroid balance, microbiome all affect then mental wellness and how you feel every day.
There's other factors that tie in. It's not always 100% thyroid, pointing the finger at the thyroid. What happens is a lot of times, like you said, you had the thyroid issue and then that pulls in the adrenal fatigue. That cortisol gets in play, our stress level goes up, more cortisol. So you've got we're cyclic people, especially women. We're super cyclic, and there is a lot of cycles that happen when one thing gets triggered.
So, on my side of the house, the thyroid affects your skin and your hair and your nails as well.
Yes.
How do those kind of manifest for someone to know maybe their thyroid is off? Like, what is happening with those areas that you see issues?
Yeah, when the thyroid starts to become off balance, a lot of times we'll see women with, that last 3 quarters of the eyebrows start to thin. Our hair, skin, and nails become like, or especially the hair and the nails, they become more brittle. We see it, start to fall out sometimes. And you'll see that, with hormone change sometimes too. Like maybe, we have a baby, and then all of a sudden, like we have some hair loss, and that's normal. Our hormones are definitely at play there.
Yeah, high testosterone makes your hair fall out
Correct.
also.
Mhm.
It makes your face super furry.
Yes.
It makes your sweat a little smellier.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah, so hormones definitely get in there
they
too.
definitely do. Absolutely.
But with the brow thing, I can't tell you how many times I've had someone where we can't really, it doesn't make sense to wax the brow anymore because the tail's begun to be missing.
Yeah.
And I've said, go get your thyroid check. And it's off
Mhm.
because the more dramatic that is, like when I have somebody where their brow stops in the middle,
Yeah.
I'm like, you're way off. The only problem is sometimes you are having a symptom with thyroid, and I know you definitely want to talk about this. And they go to the doctor and they're like, "Oh no, you're in the window of
Normal
okay."
range. Yeah.
Yeah. And you really do have to find someone that will look at those numbers differently.
Yeah.
Because if you're symptomatic but in range, there's still probably a thyroid issue there.
Amen, sister. Now, in the holistic world, we like your TSH level to be 0.35 to 2. Anything kind of outside of that range warrants attention. And so, I personally like to get a good picture of how the thyroid is functioning via temperature. And so I say, take your temperature in the morning, right when you wake up, jot that down. You'll do it for like 3 days in a row. Jot that down. And then when you're feeling your absolute best, take your temperature again. And then when you're feeling really crummy, take your temperature. So you'll do that three temperatures a day for 3 days in a row. And if you're under 98.6 at any time, I would say you may have a thyroid sluggishness issue.
So even medicated, I run at 97.1
Hmm.
all the time.
Yeah.
So it does make it hard to then diagnose that I have a fever when I have a fever.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yeah, because my fever might be 99.9,
Yeah.
versus somebody else.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's been a thing for me. I have done just about everything you can do. I
Right.
do run a little bit colder, but I'm not miserably colder.
That's
So,
good. That's good.
it's more that, and I've been there so long. It's interesting. I don't know how I'd feel if I was
If you were
actually the
warm.
right temperature.
Right, I know. It's interesting, like, I see people in the summertime wearing sweatshirts, like hoodies and sweatshirts in in 110 degrees, and I'm like,
How do they do that?
let's check your thyroid." But
Well,
yeah,
I do that just because it's freezing inside every building that
this is
you go
true. Yeah,
into in
yeah,
that
you
time
walk
of
in,
year.
you're like, "I don't wanna be cold." Yeah.
I always hated to be in Texas in the summer because, like, you go outside and you melt, and then you go inside and you freeze because it seemed like everybody ran the AC, like,
Yes,
so much
60.
colder. Yeah, and I'm
Yep.
like, "Ah."
Yes.
So yes, so you kind of addressed, so when do you happen to know what a traditional doctor's thyroid range is? Like, you're talking about holistic, but what is a regular
Yes.
medicine? What is their range?
Now, it depends on their age, but, they'll let it go up to 8, sometimes, and For us, anything over 2 is like, "Ooh,"
Mhm.
Um, and it's interesting because a lot of times they'll say, "I don't feel good."
Yeah.
They have a lot of the symptoms, and, mainstream is I come from mainstream healthcare, and so we looked at the thyroid as, here, your TSH is off, so let's go ahead and give you some T4, which is an inactive thyroid hormone. Now, going back to that cell function, you can throw all the medication you want at it, but number 1, can it get into the cell? And number 2, can you convert T4 to T3? So if you don't have the mechanism to convert, and you don't have the tools and the process that's needed to convert it, how are you going to utilize it? And that's why a lot of the times we have people that are on thyroid medication, but they still don't feel well.
Mhm.
They're still not losing weight. They may feel good for a couple months and then they're like, "I feel crummy again." This is so common. And that's why, cuz they have a conversion issue, or they have a cell inflammation issue.
So they're medicated but not feeling better. Will their
Correct.
numbers change in that environment or will they look the same?
Usually they'll change a little bit, cuz
Okay.
some will get in.
So they'll look and say, "Oh, I'm better,"
Correct.
but not
Cuz it
corrected,
went down a little
but
bit,
not corrected.
not always corrected.
And
Mhm.
so you think if you include the inflammatory reduction through diet and other means,
Absolutely.
then now that conversion will perform better?
Should yeah. Yep, because you'll have the tools that you need to convert, and more will get into the cell, and then you shouldn't need as much.
So on that front, let's talk about iodine because I actually tried that as a
Did
supplement.
you?
It didn't work great for me, but I understand there's an importance of having iodine in the diet.
Yeah. Yeah. And iodine is so important, and I think it gets it's a very overlooked mineral these days, and every single cell in the body needs the iodine, for especially for the endocrine. So, your thyroid gland needs it, your adrenals, your ovaries, your breast tissue, your prostate gland, all the hormones. They need the iodine. And technically, the RDA says, I believe that the RDA amount that they say that we need is too low.
Okay.
Me personally, which it's about like 150 micrograms or whatever. But we really should probably get much higher, because the thyroid tissue will use what it needs, and then whatever's left will go to the breast tissue and some of our organs and glands. A lot of times there's not even enough for the thyroid.
Okay.
So then how is the breast tissue going to get it? And this is one of the reasons why I think that we have a lot of breast cancers.
Hmm.
There's a lot of reasons, but that's one
Sure.
of the reasons
Sure.
that I feel that we have a lot. And yeah, I think more something like 5 to 15 milligrams daily is more ideal, to then allow the nutrients into those cellular uh, to the cell, so that we can then utilize a lot of that more efficiently and effectively. And that would help men too with the prostate as well.
So what are the best sources of iodine?
Now, I like things that are salty.
Yes.
Of
So
course,
iodized salt.
iodized salt technically is enough to they started adding the iodine to the iodized salt just enough to not get you a goiter, because people
Mhm.
were having goiters back in the day. And so seaweed to me is really good. Potatoes are good. So there's a ton of amazing sources for
Yes, because
iodine.
so for me, we don't use much iodized salt. We
We
use
don't either.
mineralized salt.
Yes.
However, when I'm boiling something, I throw in the iodized salt.
Yeah.
So I'm boiling a vegetable, I'm boiling a potato, I'm
Yeah.
boiling a green bean or something, and then I'm like, okay, this is the place I'm going to use the iodized. But for me, I'm probably not getting iodized every day. Well, I say that if you're eating in the world, you're getting iodized
Yeah.
in the world.
You are.
But it's good to know other sources to eat it or put it in. Like I said, I tried supplementation just because I knew I
Yeah.
wasn't taking in
Enough.
a
Hmm.
bunch of iodized salt.
Yeah. And salt's just as important as those fats.
Oh yes.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up.
So, on that front of, nutrition, like what we just talked about those items, but like
Yeah.
what other dietary things could be helpful for the thyroid?
I think vitamin D and the B complex are going to be super, super beneficial to, and then also glutathione. Glutathione is one of the best ways to help boost your energy, get that cell methylation back up, and help to boost, the mitochondria function so that you can produce more energy and then keep that inflammatory process down.
It actually helps your NAD levels
That
also.
too.
And
That's
glutathione is tricky. Like it isn't really one you want to go out and buy a pill form
no.
supplement. It's not going to work.
Mm-mm. No.
I have found one that is a paste that is in a liposomal paste that is a good delivery system.
Awesome.
But we do a lot of shots and
Yeah.
IVs with glutathione.
Hmm.
I literally gave myself a glutathione shot this
You
morning.
did? That's awesome.
I was
Love it.
feeling a little inflammatory and I'd been kind of stressed the last few days. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to give myself a shot.
I could use a little glutathione this morning.
There's
That's awesome.
nothing more like
That's awesome.
difficult than trying to give yourself a shot in the butt, though, let me tell you.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
did. I made it happen. So, so on like the thyroid arena, can you give us some stories of how you have worked with people to help improve thyroid and like what the outcome of those are?
Yeah. I had a good friend of mine. She was thin her whole life. And then she hit menopause and she struggled with her mood. She struggled so bad. She became very like suicidal, super depressed. Um, I had um I've worked as a holistic nurse for a long time, and so I was like, let's just take a look and see where you're at. Let's see. And her thyroid was so sluggish. And so we worked really hard to get that back up and get that functioning to a more optimal level for her using dietary changes, lifestyle changes, and within a couple weeks, she was starting to feel better. I mean, she like didn't want to brush her teeth or get out of bed or do anything, shower, nothing. And I've known her for a very long time. That was so not like her at all. And within a few weeks, she's up, brushing her teeth, taking a shower. She feels better little by little by little each day. And now you would never know. And she's completely fine. So it's like this transition that she had to get through.
So, what kinds of things did you do with her to get her there?
We did dietary changes. We changed up her foods that she was eating. We added more fats. We did some natural thyroid boosters to help. We used like a bovine,
I was
and
going to
then
ask you about organ supplements.
yeah,
Yeah.
organ supplements. And then we also this was before we knew about bioregulators, and so we also used some essential oils to actually boost the thyroid tissue as well, functionality. And then iodine.
Yeah.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, one of my other clients, he actually had thyroid cancer. They removed the thyroid gland. He had no tissue whatsoever. They had given him 6 months to live, and that was probably 10, 12 years ago, and within a few months, we same thing, we did a lot of the same therapies for him, and within a few months, like, he had thyroid um, activity, but no thyroid gland. And his endocrinologist was just like, I am baffled at how this is working for you. I don't understand it, but just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And he actually became a studied case. And he was probably 500 pounds overweight because of he had the no thyroid activity whatsoever. He lost the weight and he was doing phenomenal. And then I think last month, he went into the hospital. He had an infection and he did not make it out.
Oh.
But it wasn't because of his thyroid, which, the whole time we're like, "Oh my goodness, like you've made it through so much," and sepsis kicked in
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, it's very unfortunate, but he was a medical study. because he was doing so well with his thyroid.
Where do you think, like, I do think that there are some more traditional doctors starting to work outside of the boundaries of traditional thyroid regulation a little bit.
Hmm.
I think you have to seek that,
I do too.
but I do believe it's present where it wasn't as much before.
Yeah.
When you're looking at the future, what other advancements do you think we'll have with the thyroid, especially again, as we're looking at now children having issues and it is all starting much earlier? I think you and I would both go to how our food sources have changed
Yeah.
as part of the problem and go back and listen to that episode because it's really good.
Yeah.
But what other advancements do you see?
I think studying areas where thyroid issues don't exist would be key, because what are they doing differently that we're not doing? You know what I mean? Like, we live in America where we have the most healthcare, we have information at our fingertips, we have food super easily accessible, and yet here we are sicker than ever. Why? Right? I mean, we
Mm,
know why, but
yeah.
yeah, and it does. It goes back to the inflammatory issue. We are doing things to our bodies that is just not accepted very well.
And our bodies are rebelling.
Yes, they are. They're like, I don't want that Franken food. I don't want that, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So there's that.
So, if there's one takeaway from all of this as you're trying to help people who have thyroid issues, what is the one, like, you got to do blank?
I say, I love keto, and I think that makes one of the biggest differences. But I would say be your best advocate. And if you know something's off, don't give up. Just keep seeking, ask questions. It's okay for you to ask questions. Be your best advocate, because nobody's going to show up for you better than you.
You got to listen to your instincts.
Yes. They're
Like,
there for a
you
reason.
know what? On that note, there's so many times as a parent where your kid is sick and you know what it is, like,
Yeah.
and you go to the doctor and the doctor's like, "No, you don't know." Or like, "I don't know if you know," or whatever. But I can't tell you how often you're right. So think about that if you're going to fight for that with your child, fight for that with yourself as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that's part of this. Like, okay, your numbers are perfect per the regular doctor requirements, but half your eyebrows are missing. Like,
Yeah.
something is still
Like, I
off.
I got a hunch, and I know.
Yeah.
You can always come in and see us too. We'd love to help you if you're in the
Yeah. If you're in
St.
the St.
Louis
Louis
area.
area.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, that is an amazing topic. I hope you guys got a lot out of that. I do want to just plug that we would really appreciate your reviews and likes and following us and sharing this information with other people. We are new and we need your help, and we really want you to get the word out because we want people to feel better.
Yes, we do.
So, thanks for joining us again on this episode of Beyond the Mirror. We want to make a quick but important disclosure. The information and advice shared in this podcast are intended to provide general knowledge and understanding about wellness and health related subjects. They are not intended to replace professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or qualified health provider with any questions that you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment, and before undertaking a new health regimen. Remember, your health is your responsibility, and it's always best to consult with a healthcare professional.